Hi, sophomores. Matheny here. I'm here to introduce to you the next book, the last book that we are going to be reading together this year. Though we will be doing distance learning, I will be sharing with you a lot of video lectures via PowerPoint, hopefully uploaded to YouTube so they're easy. And you could listen to those real quick before or after you read based on what the internet says. That's the way I'm going to be laying out the important instruction for this book. So here we are, Malcolm Gladwell. He is a Jamaican British man by, parental heritage, and he lives in Canada. He's still alive. He writes for the New Yorker, and he is somebody who, fortunately, Dorn and I got a chance to see when he spoke for Seattle Arts and Lectures just this fall. He's really funny in real life. The reason I'm asking you guys to do this book to conclude our year is because my students in the past have loved this book. I mean, the reflections that you see here from last year. But as you can see, 61.5% of my students learned the most from reading Outliers at the end of the year of all the books that we read over the course of the year. So I just wanted you to kind of see why I'm asking you guys to do this, and maybe this will help you get a chance to motivate you to read the book because other kids like it. That's why I'm still doing it. You can probably also see that I kind of dropped the things that people haven't enjoyed as much. One tries to do things for sophomores. The entire reading schedule for our book and basically what we're going to be doing in language arts for the rest of the year is right here. Where it says journal reflection, those either will be a journal or an online discussion opportunity. And so we'll go ahead and we'll have signups for those just like we've had for the Zoom yesterday. So I just wanted to give you guys a chance to see this and just remind you that, yeah, the reading is going to take you longer than 25 minutes. It is. But at the same time, like I said, I really think this book is worth reading. And more importantly, other sophomores have too. This is a great audiobook. You can get it for free on Audible. And so if you'd like to do that, that's great. You don't have to critically read. I actually never make kids critically read this book. This is about understanding what Gladwell's argument is and how he chooses to keep your attention for a book-length persuasive essay. So guys, just one more little bit here to introduce our author, because again, he's alive. He's somebody that you can meet. Like I said, he was born in 1963. He's about 15 years older than me, 14 years older than me. And his mom is a psychotherapist. His dad is a math professor. And the reason that you may have heard of him or you may have heard of him before is that he writes books, but he also is a staff writer at the New Yorker magazine, and he has been since 1996. He's a runner, which is nice, or that may alienate you, as it definitely alienates Doran, but I like it. And he went to University of Toronto for college. So guys, if you want to follow Gladwell on Twitter, you can. I mean, do sophomores even use Twitter? Who knows what's going on with Twitter? Anyway, here is a Getty image, and here is his Twitter bio, and I think possibly my favorite thing about Malcolm Gladwell is that his entire biography is skinny Canadian. So just know that Malcolm Gladwell has experienced some popular success, and with all popular, successful people, he is occasionally skeptical, or people are skeptical of him sometimes. Just know that Outliers debuted at #1 on the bestseller list, and his books overall, and I'll share a few others with you, have a common theme of exploring sort of the way that people do things in society. It's about sociology, societal behaviors, the study of groups of people. Now, Gladwell is not going to write this really long book like a full-on scientific sociological study. That's not his job. If he did, it would never reach a large audience, right? We've got to think about our audience and our purpose here. Gladwell wants to share subtle themes in society with a broad group of people. So he's not going to use APA or MLA. He's not going to cite every single sentence because those types of things are difficult to read. He wants to create a page turner for you, but that's also going to educate. So know that Gladwell writes for us a sociological book, but it is like what we call pop sociology because the citations aren't embedded within the text. This makes it more readable. A few other books that you might look at here. I really like The Tipping Point because that has been something I've thought about over my life. It's basically the idea where you know how all of a sudden everyone had AirPods just a couple of years ago. We were all using wired headphones, and then it was there was a tipping point, and then all of a sudden, we were wow, AirPods. Anyway, point of the story is that was a tipping point, right, for that particular product. So tipping point is interesting. Outliers we're reading. Blink is fascinating. Blink explains how you can know that something is not authentic. Like I can spot a fake purse from 20 paces, and I know before I get a chance to inspect the bag why it's fake, because there's an artistry missing. There's something that you know in a second, but you don't have evidence yet. So blink is about when you all of a sudden like know something, but you haven't thought about it yet, which is interesting. It's about a little bit about intuition. David and Goliath is about underdogs, and then he just came up with a new one called Talking with Strangers, which is what was going on there. That one's a little bit more interesting and controversial, I will say. That one's got a little bit to do with race and conversation and why we don't listen to each other. So if you were going to read a second one after this, I'd probably read The Tipping Point, but that is his oldest. I also want to ask you to read this book because people have actually turned his name into like an adjective. He's been adjectived. People use the word Gladwellian. What you see right here is like a tiny snippet of an article from the New York Times, which is not the publication he works for. It's a totally different publication. When Malcolm Gladwell books come out, people talk about them. Adults talk about them at parties and things like that. And so the word Gladwellian has been used. So with the sentence that was used in here in the New York Times is, who wants to be the Luddite? And a Luddite is somebody who doesn't use technology, right? Somebody who's not up with like the newest technology. Who wants to be the Luddite who slows everything down by admitting he's never actually read a Malcolm Gladwell book and maybe doesn't exactly understand what is meant by the term Gladwellian, though he occasionally uses it himself? That sentence is dominated by satire, right? You making fun of the fact that people don't know what Gladwellian means. By the end of this book, we'll talk a lot more about what that means, okay? And so this is just kind of like a little hook. What will you think it means at the end of the book? I would have made you do vocab, friends. Here it is, the whole thing. And because I would have made you do this, there's a couple of words here that I want to make sure that you're clear about. I think mitigate is a word that he uses fairly often, as many things are often made less harmful or unpleasant over time in his book. The idea of a meritocracy, what it means to subvert something, what a paradigm is. If you guys could just scan through, and if you want to legit teach yourself this vocab, here is your matching Fast Five, people, because, it exists. So take a peek. Or don't. Okay, so I'm going to kind of talk you through this as if you were sitting in a table group. And so I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to kind of think about this book as we would have done it in class, even though you aren't going to necessarily have someone to talk to. If you've got like a class buddy, maybe FaceTime them right now and do this together so you can have the conversations. Okay, first thing I want you to do is determine whether or not you know what sociology means. Okay, now I told you in a slide or two ago, so if you're paying attention, you probably remember that it's the scientific study of human social behavior and its origins, developments, organizations, and institutions. It's not psychology, it's not history, but it uses psychology and history to consider how groups act, which I think is really fascinating. Sociologists are considering right now during the pandemic, like absolutely our like lack of social behavior and its effect on us. Okay, moving on. Like I said, I just want to make sure that you understand that Gladwell is famous, and some people will be like, "Oh, I love Gladwell," and other people will be like, "Oh, Gladwell, that guy's bunk." He's not, but as like I said, with anything that's become famous and popular, people have opinions. So good works of pop sociology, because I want to differentiate between like unsighted crap and unsighted works that are interesting, intellectual, and page turners. What Gladwellian pop sociology does is it synthesizes scientifically sound data-based research while still remaining quick-moving and readable. He uses stories. He relies heavily on telling stories, and he weaves these stories in a nonlinear way in order to create conclusions for an audience, right? So guys, all he's doing is using evidence and he's analyzing it, but he's writing it in a way that people actually want to read. And so as people who've spent a whole year doing sort of persuasive thesis-driven writing for me, I want you to think now about what makes thesis-driven writing engaging and what allows you to sustain an engaging thesis over a long form text. That's sort of the big structural idea that we're considering here as we read Outliers. So one of the things I always had my groups in class do was now consider one of Gladwell's big ideas. Is there such a thing as an entirely self-made success? To what extent are we responsible for our own victorious victories and our own catastrophic defeats? Sophomores in high school very frequently are starting to come to terms with who they are as people, starting to understand a lot more about their identity and how it's separate from their parents. And sometimes sophomores are incredibly hard on themselves. I'll be honest, you guys, the reason we're reading this book is my sophomores were experiencing a degree of anxiety, like I don't know, at the beginning of the 2010s that just was off the charts and blowing my mind. And I thought it was possible because they were putting too much responsibility on what they had control over and what they didn't have control over. So I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of reading. And by reading, I mean jogging and listening to audiobooks. And then this book, Outliers, was the one that seemed to me to be the most relevant for sophomores at Skyline. Sophomores who take their successes and their defeats incredibly seriously, and for some of my students with like really catastrophic and long-lasting effects. I want you to understand what you are in control over, and I want you to understand what you're not in control over. So truly, this book came from like me, Laura Matheny, wanting to meet the intellectual and sort of like social needs of my students by helping them understand what parts of society have helped to lift them up and what parts of society have not and have precluded opportunity. So you don't have to do this, but you can. Maybe some of you will. I mean, who knows? But what I would have you do is free write for 5 minutes in your notes. You would mull, what is success? To what extent are you, personally, students out in the world, responsible for your own success? And who else or what else shares in responsibility for the successes you have and why? I think it's really interesting to consider this for 5 minutes about ourselves, but I think it's also really fascinating to take a person that you know well and consider to be successful. Maybe it's one of your parents. Maybe you're fortunate that your family structure has a really successful person in it. Maybe it's somebody else that you know, excuse me, and admire in the world. But you might want to imagine empathetically, like, to what extent are they responsible for their own success? I think we'll often find that we realize that other people have had help while we hold ourselves personally accountable, and that can make us sad. So if you have time, free write for 5 minutes now in your notes, and just kind of take a second to really consider what makes you successful. To what extent is it you? Because overall, guys, as you move into next year, here's our connection to like literature and history next year. You're going to be moving into American literature and history, United States literature and history. And one of the narratives that Americans tell ourselves is that we are successful. We pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and we make ourselves successful. Most politicians want to describe themselves as a self-made person, man, in this particular case, but a self-made person, because that has like some real ethos, within our society. So we need to really consider, is that ever true? Okay, people, the next thing that I would ask you guys to consider in your table groups is a conversation to differentiate between three aspects of success. One of the first parts of Gladwell's thesis is that success comes from three places: talent, sort of the innate parts of you that necessarily are good at stuff; preparation, the hard work that you do on a daily basis to repeat actions in order to manifest like getting better at them; and then opportunity, the way that the life that you lead supports your success in a particular place or time or industry. For example, it would have been incredibly difficult, as we probably appreciate, for a woman to have been, incredibly successful as a scientist in the 1800s in Britain. All the more reason it's important that we consider Ada Lovelace as one of the first coders, right? Because she actually kind of like got in there, right? She got into the conversation. She was also Lord Byron's daughter. Yes. Side catwalk. That, if we consider Ada Lovelace, definitely she had talent. Certainly she had preparation, but opportunity would have been an issue for her, right? Now, because she was rich, because she was Lord Byron's daughter, because she had sort of all of those sort of connections within society, she also had opportunity. And as a result, she's one of the women that I'm talking to you about today, and not that many like were recorded. So in the case of Ada Lovelace, I think that's an interesting case to consider here. You want to also consider for yourself, for your personal reflection, which of these are most responsible for an individual's success, and to what extent is the time period they live in, and the people that surround them, the socioeconomic class that they belong to what extent do these things contribute to your success and to the success of other people? The big question that Gladwell poses, and again, this is the one that I think that my sophomores ask, and this is why I brought you this book and why I think it connects with my students, is why do some people succeed living remarkably productive and impactful lives while so many other people never reach their potential? You know, there's lots of good singers and dancers on TikTok. Why Charlie D'Amelio? Why Charlie D'Amelio? That's a whole other thing. Do you see what I'm saying? But like, why do some people get outlier level success? See, I made it about TikTok, but I've been pondering that. I live with a 10-year-old. So an outlier is a statistical observation that's markedly different in values from the others of the sample, right? We can appreciate. I'm just going to stick with TikTok because here we are in 2020 pandemic, and from what I understand, that's what you're doing. A statistical observation that's markedly different in value for the others of the sample. Charlie D'Amelio has more followers by a lot, I think like 8 million at last count, which was days ago, more followers than there are people in the country of Iraq. Let's just say that again. Charlie D'Amelio on TikTok has more followers than there are people in the country of Iraq. Okay? So what I want you to consider is the power that that has. Terrifying for adults, very exciting opportunity for you, but she is an outlier. She is markedly different from others. There are many teenagers TikToking. If we want to look at it as a graph instead of words, because I know that I have math people, here you go, friends. Outlier. It's out there. I prefer words though, so let's go back to those. Gladwell's thesis. Now, ultimately, as you read this thesis, okay, you're going to appreciate that Gladwell is going to give it to you and then he's going to prove it with case studies. That's what this book is all about. Gladwell's thesis is that superstars don't arise out of nowhere propelled by genius and talent. They are invariably the beneficiaries of hidden advantages and extraordinary opportunities and cultural legacies that allow those people to learn and work hard and make sense of the world in the way that other people can't. I want you to pause for a second and read that thesis a couple more times because we're going to be talking about real superstars here. One of the reasons I like Outliers is it takes Bill Gates, a hometown boy, right? And it asks us to consider what did, say, for example, the proximity that he lived to University of Washington. Like he used to sneak out at night to go code in the middle of the night at UW. So like Bill Gates on some level is successful because he lived near UW, which had access, right, to like, and he had access to this technology. He also, on some level, is the beneficiary of the fact that maybe his parents like didn't care if he snuck out. Some don't. I'm sure yours do. I definitely would. But what it comes down to is like he took that opportunity, right, to go ahead to sneak out, to go to UW, to code, yada, yada, yada. Now we log into flex times on Microsoft Teams. Do you see what I'm saying here, people? I'm not saying it's because his parents let him sneak out, but his proximity to UW and that technology, because literally of the moms club, okay, who bought a computer for his middle school. This is the sort of thing that made him successful. But he's also talented, and he also works hard. So ultimately, guys, Gladwell organizes this book, and we're getting close to the end of what I want to share with you guys today. He organizes this book using 2 sections. Part 1 is about opportunity. It's about the way that the things that you are not in control of in your life necessarily help you. Like the day of the year when you're born. Now, you might be like, are you about to go astrology on me, Matheny? Oh no, I am not about to go astrology on you. Let's be clear. But what we want to appreciate is that there are certain like calendar structures in place that privilege, for example, older students if they're born closer to the beginning of a school year because they're older, they have more intellectual development. So what are the opportunities within society that affect individuals, and how does the legacy of society affect individuals? That's the second half of the book. How does the opportunities that you inherit, when combined with your talents and your ability to have like preparation, how does this leave a legacy for other people to be successful? So Gladwell is going to consider the way that we find outliers. Some deserved, some not, some earned, and just plain lucky. Gladwell is going to go ahead and within that two-part structure of your book, he's also going to go ahead and he's going to be giving you a variety of ingredients for success. Now, ingredients in this case is a metaphor, okay? Like this is just a list of things that have or have not contributed to some people's success. I want to be clear, everyone we're talking about is not going to have every one of these qualities, okay? But each of these qualities that you see on this list, each of these ingredients for success have in some way contributed or held back the individuals that Gladwell is going to talk about in his case studies. So we're going to consider relative age, like what time the person was born. And I don't necessarily mean time of day, but time of the year, as well as like what year they were born. Like, for example, y'all can't invent the internet. It's not available to you because of your relative age. The advantage of exponentially compounding experiences, how much 10,000 hours of work manifests as expertise, what IQ or your intelligence quotient and EQ, your emotional quotient are, and the way that those ideas ironically are used in different ways they were created. Parenting style is also going to be something Gladwell shows to be a factor in your ability to be successful. Concerted cultivation versus natural growth are two parenting styles. The extent to which your family has generational wealth or has not had access to generational wealth, and meaningful work. Those are two pieces that are going to ultimately consider the way that socioeconomic status can manifest as your opportunity for self-actualization. And then last but not least, the second part of the book, cultural legacy, right? What are the different ways that the extent to which we use honor, language, and education in our culture, how do these help you be successful or keep other people from being successful? So guys, over the course of this book, we will talk about the Bills. We've got Bill Joy, who you may not know. He's a California Bill. And we've got Bill Gates, arguably both vitally important bills. We'll be talking about Mozart, not so much why the wigs, etc., but how did he become such an infamous genius. And we'll be taking a look at these dudes, some British gentlemen from Liverpool before their mustache phase. This is a young Beatles, you can tell by the bangs. But we'll be considering the Beatles. How did they become so incredibly successful and enduring over time? We will not spend a lot of time with Charlie D'Amelio, though. That's something that you can ponder on your own. So guys, as our last slide today, I want you to consider these essential questions. As I ask you to begin reading the book tomorrow, because you don't have to start reading today. I'm going to do a little video to introduce the prologue tomorrow, but as you can tell, we've got 5 essential questions for Outliers. The first one, like I said, is really the question of the whole book, and the question that most of my sophomores are asking themselves. Why are some people successful, remarkably productive, living impactful lives? And then there's lots of other really smart people that never reach their potential. To what extent is there such a thing as a self-made success? As our bridge to next year, what are the complex ways that privilege manifests specifically in American culture? What gifts do our own history give us? There's going to be a reflective piece here, right? As we consider what our personal cultural inheritance is. And I think that's why my students like this book best. And how could the world benefit if more of our students, more of our kids were granted opportunities to fulfill their potential? So ultimately, guys, this is a persuasive essay, and I'm going to ask you to read it and think about it over the course of the next couple weeks. I'll see you back here tomorrow for this little second part of our introduction, and then you'll go ahead and you will read your book. Thanks, guys. I hope you're having a great day.